Really a pleasure for me to introduce Katrine Tully. Katrina, I can't even remember which year it was that we first met each other. It must have been during the GFC or
2007.
2007, just heading into the GFC when we saw all of the looming clouds on the horizon. And I put on my little training wheels at the time together with another guy called Tim Catterall and Katrina. And we started a small little transition group in where our church was. And at the time, I just realized what a difference a professional can make to the lives of those going through this period. And so, and Katrina, you've been just terrific through all of that. And of course, we've kept in touch. And Katrina's then worked in directioneering, which is kind of an outplacement sort of organization. And she's since founded her own firm called Career Transform. And she's been coaching for 20 years in performance, career leadership, and transition of senior management. And she's got clients, including she's worked for Westpac, she's worked for CBA, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the government, and even the ABC. There'll be a few reporters there, Katrina, that might need some help at the moment. And obviously, being a professional, she's used all the various tools that are kind of psych tools in this space. So Katrina's got lots of experience in FMCG and pharmaceutical, but when I know her, she's a devoted mom. She's a great wife to her husband. She's a business owner. And now she's, looking very calm, but she's got a child going through HSC. So she's clearly, kind of managing to do all of this without having a big flap. So well done, Katrina. And I'm very delighted you are here to talk to us about her topic, career transformation post-COVID. We are optimistic, at least, that there is a post-COVID. So thank you for that topic. So I'll hand over to you now.
Technology is working. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. Because it's cutting out for me, so I'm not sure what's going on here. So thanks, Kokon. Yes, we did meet a long time ago, and it makes me feel very old when you describe my background. Thanks for that. But yes, it was always a pleasure. And I know when you talked to me, I think 4 years ago, about starting this group, I was very supportive, and I did say anytime you needed help that I would be there. So that's why I'm here too, because I think this is a really important support for anyone. And it's, the more people we can help, the better, I think. So thanks for introducing me. Now, I'm going to talk today about sort of how I support people through career change or career transition, what we might call sometimes. But I also wanted to kind of have a bit of a slant on how you can maybe pivot if you need to. Not everyone will need to, and not everyone needs to. But I do find often people are interested in that. So I'm going to kind of focus a little bit on that today, if that's okay with everyone. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll talk through a little presentation that I did. Oh, you've all disappeared. Hang on a sec. How do I share? I'm going to have to share and then open. Okay, tell me if it's not working. Can everyone see that on their screen? Oh, got some thumbs up. Yay! That's so exciting. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, as I said, we're going to talk about how do we pivot. But first, I need to explain kind of what the process of, I guess, moving into another job actually involves, in my opinion. And then I'll kind of show you the slant. So I feel nowadays, and I think this goes even for people that are looking for a similar job to what they were doing before, this whole career pivot thing that I'm talking about a lot at the moment, I actually think it's the key to any transition success, because understanding what it is that you bring to the business first is actually pivotal for any career transition. So I'm going to break down what I'm talking about when I talk about the transition process, or what job search actually involves, right? So so I guess what I wanted to explain is that job search is actually a marketing campaign. I think we need to kind of fundamentally get back to that, right? We are going to be marketing a product. Does everyone get that? So I think a lot of us feel really uncomfortable with that idea, but ultimately, you know, that's what we're doing. We're selling a product. So just getting that concept of this is a marketing campaign, and being able to see ourselves that way is really, really important. And deconstructing that for ourselves. So, I mean, we would do this for a business, right? If we were working for someone else and we were marketing a product, we would spend some time doing what first? We would be understanding our product, right? So when we are doing this marketing campaign, we also need to think about, what is my product? What is it about my product that makes me unique? And this is where I'm going to focus today, this process of breaking down your achievements. What is it that you enjoy doing? What are your values? What's important for you to have in the process of developing a career plan? That process is critical to career success. I think all the time. If you think about it, when we're even in a job, do you think the people around you need to know what it is that you're doing and what you're bringing to the business? Do you think that would be useful? So this is kind of a process that we should be doing all the time. But certainly when we're looking at career transition, we need to be thinking about this even more. So understanding what our product is the first step. Then, of course, understanding our brand, thinking about our brand in that way. So personal brand, or I think everyone's talking about this. I've seen it all over LinkedIn. Everyone's talking about brand. And a lot of people don't really understand what that means. But it's what I define brand as is, what is it that you bring? How did you benefit the business you worked for in the past? If you can't articulate that, how are you going to be able to talk at an interview or develop a resume? So this is the stuff that we need to develop before we go out and market ourselves. Once we have a bit of an idea of what we want and what we bring, then where do we want to sell it to? So what is our market? This is the same sort of thing that you would do if you're working for a business and trying to market a product, right? I can't see any nodding. I need to get some feedback. Otherwise, I don't know if I'm actually talking live or if I've lost my internet, which happens a lot in Kalara. So we need to get some clarity around our market next. So understanding our market and then preparing our marketing documents. What's our marketing document? It's a resume, right? Yep. So, but a lot of people that I work with, or when I first talk to them, they say, oh yes, I've got a great resume. And I'll say, well, have you thought about what your brand is first? And they'll say, no, I just threw it together. But if they were working for a business and doing this process for someone else, they would have spent a lot more time really understanding their product first. So the benefit of doing some thinking about this and breaking down your product and understanding your brand first is that your marketing materials, first of all, are going to look very different. So, and I'm going to show you how to do this in a minute, but I just want to give you an understanding of the overall process before I go into it. So obviously, your marketing materials are important, but I've got a lot of clients who've never even used their resume. but it's the being able to articulate what makes you unique and your brand in a conversation, which could just be a coffee or a beer, or I don't know, it could be any type of discussion. It doesn't have to be a formal interview. But being able to articulate what you bring actually creates opportunity. So that whole process of deconstruction helps you with that process as well, being able to talk about yourself. And then, of course, once we've understood our product, we've got our branding right, we've got our marketing materials, we know what our market's going to be, then the next step is actually marketing ourselves. I'm not going to really cover this in depth today. That's a whole nother conversation. What is networking? We all hate that word a lot. And when I talk about this, I do always say I'm not talking about Amway here. I'm talking about authentic connections with people. And obviously that is going to be the key to career success. It's one of the most important parts, because it's not what you know. It's not who you know. It's who knows you. And that is in your control. It's about getting out there and talking to people. But again, it's all backed up by this understanding of product. I actually build this as a pyramid to really show you that it's a structured approach, which one step is built upon the next, this marketing campaign that I'm talking about. All right, does that all make sense? Yep, okay. So I'm going to talk about today, overview is, first of all, what is a personal brand and how do I define it? Then I'm going to talk about how do I redefine my career plan based on what I bring rather than where I've been. And that's usually what most people need to do at the moment. I'm finding a lot of my clients need to reframe a bit, depending on where they were, but you know, it's about how do I market myself in a different market potentially. I'm going to talk about how to redo some of your marketing materials based on that information. I'm not going to go into detail here because I don't have time, but I'll cover that briefly, and then I'll talk about what else you need to do. Does that make sense? All clear as mud? Right. I'm getting one. I've got one person thumbs up. I can't see anyone else. Okay. So, how do we prepare a personal brand? So, what I'm talking about here is, I've talked about redefining career plan, but what I'm about to show you is a process of deconstruction of your experience, which is quite hard work and quite navel-gazing-y, but it's critical. If you haven't thought about what you bring in this way, it'll be a lot harder to sell yourself. The process I'm going to show you now will also help you build those resume and the LinkedIn materials. And what they are focusing on is your key achievements. I'm sure everyone's thought about achievements or has seen the word achievements on current resume formats. Have you all seen that around the place? And it's a word that most people find really, they find it difficult to define. So I've had a lot of clients say to me, oh, look, my achievements are, you know, I won an Employee of the Year in 2010, or, you know, awards for something. That's kind of not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is, how did you make a difference in the business you were working with? We always have personal achievements as well, and that, don't get me wrong, I don't mean that they are not important. They would go probably on your resume. Like if you've climbed Mount Everest, that is probably worth including somewhere. I know Kokon would find that really interesting in his interviews with you. But probably you wouldn't put it under the job you were working in, right? Achievements need to go under each role. And I'm going to show you a process to help you identify those. But we're also going to be talking about capabilities or strengths. And this is my little strengths model. And I talk about this in all the work I do first up. So what we're going to focus on today is this part, this can-do bit. So we're going to deconstruct achievements to understand what our experience is. It'll involve, your qualifications are pretty clear, but when we're looking at what we can do, it includes all of that stuff. But that doesn't help us identify our transferable strengths or key capabilities. And my process that I work people through gets people to think about also what they will do, this bit. So what are their interests? So where your interests cross over with your achievements or your skills, that's where we get that beautiful strengths part. They're those transferable key capabilities that we can actually move across into any different, organisation, even industry. So being able to articulate those, and I call them, instead of using the word strengths, I call it on a resume, I would call it key capabilities. But that's really important to be able to articulate based on evidence of our experience. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do. Obviously, your perfect job should also include values. So if your values match that of the organisation, that's where we get this gorgeous little triangle here, which gives you a real picture of the perfect job for you. I spend a bit of time with people on that, and that then helps us get some ideas of options. But rather than using job titles, which in the past we used to do, I'm very much more interested in the detail of what you want to be doing, rather than, I want to be a, I don't know, management consultant at Deloitte's. I take that away from people and we start to think about kind of broadly, well, I like doing this work and I'm really good at this, and this is, it's sort of defining the job description rather than a job title. Because the new world of work, job titles are meaningless a lot of the time. I'm sure Kokon's seen some interesting job titles as well. I've seen some very strange job titles. They don't mean anything to anyone. But being able to articulate what it is you want to do is really important. So the key to career success is that whole being able to identify our transferable key capabilities. Does that all make sense? Have I introduced that clearly enough? So I use a very structured approach to do this. So I get people to create what I call an achievements database. Now, this is usually where people start hating me when I'm working with them, because what I tell them to do, and I'm going to give you the overview, what I get them to do is deconstruct their experience, focusing mainly on the last 10 years. If people want to go back further, that's fine. No problem. But let's just start with the last 10 years you've worked. So I say to them, okay, first of all, what you need to do is write a list of all of the achievements, 3 per year for the last 10 years. So they're basically doing an index of their key achievements. All right, so what we do is we say, okay, 2020, top 3 things I achieved, 2019, top 3 things, 2018, etc. Does that make sense? So that's your index of achievements. Now, when I talk about achievements, I am talking about where you have benefited the bottom line of the business. These are results, as I said here, results focused. So, examples. You might have been running big projects, right? You might have run a project a transformation project. Everyone's talking transformation at the moment. So you've run a transformation project which, you know, cut 10% cost out of the business. So what was that worth? There's usually a dollar figure associated with things like that. Okay, so that would be one of them. You might have, if you're involved in customer support or something, there might have been a customer complaint metric for the business that was too high. It was identified by someone that it was too high. So you implemented a new training program for all customer support people and reduced customer complaints within a time frame. That's results focused. That's what we're looking for. Does everyone understand that kind of idea? I'm seeing a few people nodding, so hopefully we can understand what we're looking for is specific measurable results if possible. Not always possible, I understand. A lot of lawyers say to me, God, I can't give any value to what I bring, which is interesting considering what they charge. But actually, when I get them to think about it, you know, the advice that they gave potentially a business on a transaction, the advice might have been, don't go forward, right? Don't do it. And so what I say to them is, what if they had gone forward? What would they have lost? What would have been the cost to that business? So then we're starting to get numbers anyway. Prevention of loss, mitigating risk. These are all massively important achievements for most businesses, and definitely worth including in that list. So we start off with a wonderful list of achievements. Hopefully, if all of you can do maths as well as I'm sure all of you can, we've got 30, right? So 3 per year for 10 years, that's 30. So we've got a list of 30 achievements. So then we get to the fun stuff. What I suggest people do, and you know, some people do it differently, but this is the process, the way that I think works best, is I say, right, each achievement now gets a page. And at the top of the page, we put the number from the list. So you've got your beautiful index. So you'd put number 1, and you might have called it, you know, optimization strategy or something, 2019. I definitely would date these pages because it will be useful later. And then I get people to break the achievement down into challenge, into what I call CARs, right? I call it the CAR formula, challenge, action, result. Now, I'm sure you've probably all seen or have heard of behavioural interviewing. Lots of fun. Has everyone seen it? I'm not sure if I need to explain what it is. But, you know, generally when HR people are interviewing you, they will use some form of behavioural interviewing. It's usually open-ended questioning around criteria that they're looking to meet. So if they're looking for someone who's got customer experience, they'll ask an open-ended question such as, could you give me an example where you've been involved in customer experience or where you've been faced with a difficult customer? That would be a classic behavioural question. It usually is asking for examples. Not all of them ask in that way, but that's kind of what they're looking for. And what they're looking for in terms of an answer, a lot of government, I think the government training, they do STAR, they use the STAR formula. Has anyone seen that one? Situation, time, yeah. So I don't like that language. I'm very big on positive psychology in my practice. So language, I think, is really important, particularly when we're feeling a little bit like we've lost control. And so using positive language and controlling that language, which is something we can control, is really useful in building you back to where you need to be to sell yourself, to market yourself. So using language like, well, the challenge we faced was, so let's say one of your achievements is the customer experience one that I was talking about, where the customer complaint number was really high. So you might say, well, the challenge we faced was Customer complaints were identified by the leadership team as being really high, and I was asked to work on that project. And you might talk a little bit about, you know, the scope of it. You know, you might say, well, the customer complaints were, you know, very high. 90% of customers were showing negative results. You might talk about what, you know, how big the customer base was, what's that worth to the business. You might look at some of the dollar values around that. And you might talk about site, like in terms of geography. Did it cover the whole of Australia, whole of Europe, whole of Asia? What was the scope there? So talking scope when you're defining challenge is useful for you. Then talking about actions is really simple. So what did I do to remedy that issue? So, you know, I did a whole bunch of research, analysed all the data from customers, put together a training program for all the customer experience people, implemented that training across 3 states within a time frame, et cetera, et cetera. So you just talk about step 1 through to step X, whatever it is. Does that make sense? Yep. And then the most important part is this results bit. So then we say, well, what was the benefit to business here? So I would say reduced customer complaints by 80% within 3 months. That would be kind of a great result that you could talk about there. Ideally, we want numbers there as much as possible. If we're talking projects, a lot of project managers say to me, well, you know, I can't, it's hard. And I say, well, you know, projects, we usually talk about quality, we talk about time frame, and we talk about budget. So that's always useful information when we're talking results there. So you can talk about that. There's always numbers there. You could be involved in you know, emergency response, so response times, or no loss. You know, I've worked with a lot of manufacturing businesses, and people who work in those areas have safety issues, you know, and if you've got 0 lost time injuries, that's an awesome result. So you want to have a 0, you don't want to have 100. So, you know, it's just different types of results, but they're really important. So when you're telling your story and you're answering that behavioural question, this becomes really easy once you've done this work. So you're going to have 30 pages. Yes, it is a lot of work. But you're going to have 30 pages of these stories where you can answer lots and lots of behavioural questions around lots and lots of different criteria, because you will also then do this step for each one of what capabilities did I use here. So when we're using my example where I was talking about the customer experience one, I might say, well, okay, what capabilities did I use here? Well, I did lots of training and development. I had to do a lot of influencing, negotiating with leadership to get access to these people, you know, communication, project management. I had to run the project within a time frame. All sorts of capabilities might have been used there. There's lists of words. If you go into New South Wales government doesn't give us much, but it has given us a wonderful capability framework. So if you go in there, there's lists of words for this stuff. If you want to get access to that, it's all free. It's called the New South Wales Capability Framework, I think. So you can see you're going to have 30 stories ready to go. And from that, those 30 pages, we're going to start to see themes. We're going to see themes of capabilities that are going to come through all of this data. Do you see where I'm going now? So we will have some really strong data backing up what our key capabilities are. So if we had to say, what are our top 6 capabilities based on this evidence? So you've got this evidence-based development of brand. So our brand, is based on this information. So we're going to choose, I mean, I like to get down to 3 ideally. What are the 3 key capabilities that you bring to a business? Now, looking at those 30 pages, it's going to become very clear to you. Does that make sense? It's a very structured approach. But I find the structure actually gives you that really strong foundation when you are, in that marketing phase. So when you have to go and talk to someone about yourself, it's so easy because you will have assessed, because you're going to do some research before you go and meet with anyone, you're going to assess what their needs might be. And you're going to think, which are the best stories that show that I have what they need? It will also help you decide, is this for me? If you want to, if you've got to pick your top 6 key capabilities and you say, that is my brand, that will help you identify what sort of roles you want, because that's the stuff you want to be doing. Because assumably it's going to be the stuff you enjoy as well. Usually people, when they go through that 30 pages and pick their top 6 key capabilities, they do find they choose the ones that they enjoy the most. So here's some examples of some transferable key capabilities that you can use if you want to. I mean, these are just very basic starting point, but it gives you an idea of how you might sell this stuff. So I don't know if Kokon agrees with me, but I do like to have a section on key capabilities on a resume on the front page, because it's, if you think about it, what's important for the reader is what you bring. And if you make it simple for them and you say, well, here's the top 5 or 6 things that I bring to your business, it's just so much easier for the person who's trying to extract that information from you. And really, you want to keep it easy for the reader, right? A resume is about your customer. So your customer in this situation is the person potentially reading it. So you want to make it easy. I like having a section like this, but these are some examples. And so, what I get people to do is think about, okay, well, if leadership is one of your key capabilities, which showed through your stories, how would you define that for yourself? And this is just an example of where someone has defined it like this. And, everyone's different. Someone might define leadership in quite a different way. Just depends on you. But this is an opportunity for you to really think about what you mean by the words you're using. Does this all make sense? How are we going for time? We okay?
How much longer would you like, Katrina?
Probably I can be 5 minutes. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Perfect. All right. So the next step, where are we, is thinking about career plan. So as I said to you before, from this information, we then start to put together a bit of a job description based on what we like to bring to the business. Okay, so that's what I was talking about before, getting some clarity around what you want to do based on all of that evidence that we've just developed. And then once we've done that, we also then put together an evidence-based resume. So we use those stories, that achievements database that we've just developed, because, of course, we're going to go home and do that tonight. And then we're going to build our resume from that. So each of those stories, in theory, they won't all fit onto your resume, of course, but the ones you want to put onto your resume, what you will do is create a 1-line achievement statement from those cards. So each card would have an achievement statement below it. And then that would just get cut and pasted onto your resume under each job. I'm not really talking in detail about how to build a resume. I'm assuming you've all kind of thought about that already, but if you need more information, you know where we are. But if those achievement statements were in your resume and you've got a car sitting behind it in your brain, car being challenge, action, result, story, then when they ask you about these achievement statements, let's say they're reading your resume in the interview, which they often do, and they say, well, tell me about that achievement that you've got there. And you will be able to say, let me tell you about it. In 2020, one of the challenges I faced was, and so what I did was, and the benefit to business was that I saved $1 million in 2020. It's so easy when you do it this way, right? It's so simple. It's not rocket science, but no one's doing it. So the difference, if you've done this work, the difference in terms of preparation will be really obvious for the person interviewing you. And I'm sure Kokon can add to that. I would say he's probably seen when someone's prepared as opposed to someone who may not be prepared. So overview of next steps. I'm going to sort of fly a little bit through what we recommend people do next. So once you've looked at your job description, we then get people to think about options. So where would you like to go next based on that kind of raw data of what you like to do? And I always say, let's take the box you've been working in, where you've been, away, and let's look outside the box. And it's about, reading a lot, looking. I mean, sometimes I get people to just download any job ads that they see and think about why do they look at those job ads. And usually that helps to kind of get a sense of what bits they're interested in doing, and take away the industry they've been in and think about what other industries might be interesting to them. Once they've done that, then of course you do your resume, like I've just said. I talk about LinkedIn a lot, and I know I've put it down here. Just one little tip. LinkedIn is not a resume. LinkedIn is where you get noticed, yes. What you want to do though is get people excited to want to contact you. If you put everything in there, it's like they don't need to. Does that make sense? I always say it's like showing a little bit of leg instead of doing the full Monty. You don't want to be laying everything out there on LinkedIn. I'm very much about putting almost like an index on LinkedIn of where you've worked and the scope of the roles. I would never be putting achievements on LinkedIn. That would be something that stays on my resume. And actually, once you've done a resume in this way and really spent some time building it, you want to hold on to it. It's a valuable document for you. Okay, so once you've done that, then it's about preparing for the interview based on all of that data. You've done your cars already. You've pretty much covered 90% of interview questions by doing an achievements database. So easy, so easy. So really it's about thinking about your pitch and thinking about how you might, answer that tell me about yourself question, your little 60-second commercial, thinking about how you might answer that. Easy. Look at industries. I usually get clients to think about more than one to broaden the market to them. Once you start talking to people, it's good to have a few options to talk about. I get people to research those industries, think about what organisations sit in those industries. And I usually get people to pick, their top 20 based on whatever criteria they want to use. And then, really, really important is research. Thinking about where are those industries going. Think about, read as much as you can from any futurist you can get your hands on. I know universities are a hot pot for all that stuff. If you can get access to a university library, there's PhD students writing about this stuff all the time. So, when you're in a conversation, let's say you were interested in working in telecommunications, and you can have a conversation about what you think the future of telecom is going to be in Australia, and where we're going, and what 5 years' time is going to look like. This is an interesting conversation. And during COVID, people are even more interested in this. So it's an interesting, it's a good conversation starter, and it's a useful conversation for most people to be having. So when you're out there networking with people, that becomes really important. So when I'm talking networking, as I said, we're talking about authentic connections. So it's, that's a whole process that I can talk about for, hours. But, you know, it's starting with people that you know, and then kind of trying to expand the people that know you. And using that sort of research approach is where I spend most of my time with clients, thinking about how they can approach the market in that way. Sorry about the rushed overview of that, but that's like in a nutshell kind of how we approach it. Does that all kind of make sense?
Thank you, Katrina. I think we maybe now if we come off the screen share.
Done.
Wonderful. And I might just stop the recording. Whilst I work out how to do that, let's open up for 10 minutes of group discussion, and then I'll go to our breakout groups. We'll have 3 breakout groups, one led by Kokong, one led by Daniel and Jeannie, and one led by Tracy and myself. And then we'll finish at 10:30 in our breakout groups. And Katrina will go 10 minutes to each group. But over to you guys. Welcome also to Frank McGowan, who's joined us during the presentation. Just a quick wave of the hand, Frank. Great. So yeah, any questions for Katrina whilst we're part of one big group? Just unmute yourself and yep, Gabriel.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Katrina. Just a question about other social media. Do you have any opinions about your public profile on other forms of social media?
I have a lot of opinions about that. Look, it depends on the age group of the person I'm working with. I would say in terms of marketing yourself, you probably don't need to worry too much about any other forms of social media in terms of trying to market yourself. Obviously, you do need to be careful what's on your social media. And is that what you're asking me? Because the answer is obviously that is very, very important nowadays, and every employer checks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I periodically do Google searches of my name, so it's interesting what pops up and how old some of the stuff is that pops up. So yeah, I just wanted to open up the conversation to see what you had to say on that.
Yes, look, I have had clients who have had really, really awful experiences because of other people, you know, doing some not very nice things to them on social media, and really ruining their reputation. And cleaning data. I don't know if Kokon's had anything to do with any of that, but cleaning data from Google is very expensive. So ideally, you don't want to put anything on there. I mean, you can't control what other people do, obviously, but yeah, you want to keep everything really, you know, you have to assume you put things on there that you want your parents to see and nothing else.
I think we had a question from Frank Fields.
Hi, yes, thank you, Peter. Hi, Katrina, I'm Frank. Just a quick question regarding what you should put on your CV if you've been out of work a very long time and seeking work. I'm sure there's others in a similar situation. What do you recommend there?
You know, I have always said I don't think you need to say anything. If you know, obviously, when I do hit it up front with, I talk about the 60-second commercial at the beginning of an interview. So when you're meeting someone for the first time in a job search situation, and the first question is usually something like, tell me about yourself, or what brings you here, or something like that. I usually cover that, you know, in that sort of 60-second commercial. So, you know, you explain what you want to explain, and you control the messaging there. A lot of women I've worked with have been out of work. That's been one of the things I've done to help people on the side. Is there's a lot of women, you know, 10 years out, having babies, and, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. So I focus on what they have done, and usually there's skills they've gained during those times anyway. You know, a lot of my clients who've had years break, they've done things with those years. They've been doing things, they've been learning things. So let's include it.
And sorry, just to clarify, so from the perspective of your CV, or you know, the summarized version on LinkedIn, for say, I don't know, 9 months or a year, you might be out of work, is, you know, and not being able to do something like travel the world or whatever in these strange times. So is it, you know, would you recommend it, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's, you know, being honest about what you've learned, etc. But, you know, would something like career break, I mean,
yeah,
be acceptable? It might not stack up, you know, given what's been happening in the last 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, you can say career break if you want to. I mean, I get people, you know, most people will say, you know, they start their own little like I'm consulting, right? So you've got your own consulting business. And, you know, if you haven't, then I definitely don't think you can lie.
Absolutely.
But, you know, with COVID, I don't think there's there's so many people that have had breaks at the moment because of COVID. I don't think it's going to be an issue. Like, what employer is going to hold that against you? What do you think, Kokon?
I think frankly, with COVID, we've got the perfect excuse, so I wouldn't worry about it. But even without COVID, I think, you know, people go through career breaks in the best of times, and question is, what are you doing during the career break? Is it relevant to what you're looking at? And sometimes it's not relevant, and that's okay. But you've taken a break for a particular reason, and but they, you know, if they're gonna be interviewing you for something, for a new role, and what you've done in the last 18 months is not relevant to it, then that's not what you focus on. You focus on what you've done before that. That's relevant, and that's what they're after.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions while we're all together in a big group? Daniel?
Thank you, Katrina. Thank you, Peter. I just, as an employer, we are concerned when we look at gaps in a CV. I think that's the starting point. We just have question marks. And I think that Frank's point is, should we include them? And I think the answer is yes. Now, let me just give you some examples. I have a client that I'm going to speak to after this call who has, for medical reasons, had to come out of the marketplace for quite an extended period. Now, do we as employers penalize him for that? Absolutely not. It could be us. So I think he is upfront about it. And the fact is, we're going to help him explain that he had to take a break because of medical reasons. And secondly, a compassionate one is, you know, I took a break for 6 months to look after my elderly relative because I felt that was the most important thing to do. That's a very, very positive statement. Here is a caring person that's prepared to put family before finances. And I think that discussion is a good one to have. Now, there's another thing. I had to take a break for 7 months and there was a very good reason for it. It's difficult to talk about, but I'm upfront about it. So I think that my emphasis here, gaps are a concern to an employer. I find gaps very challenging, and I would see what I'm missing. But credible answers, sensible answers, answers that I've just explained, a few of the examples are really, really positive and shouldn't penalize a person who's been out of work for several months or even several years. So just let's bring the positive side to it. I'd just like to bring on one point that Katrina said as well, to encourage people to think about achievements. I think your example about a lawyer is a good example. Remember that achievements can be quantified in many industries, but in many industries they can't. If you retained a client for 5 years, that's an achievement. If you actually got an award because you're the best employee, this year, irrespective of figures, that's an achievement. So if those of you are struggling with percentages and figures and all the things that make achievements, just be encouraged by the fact that things that you do that are recognized by others, like an award, are achievements. So those are the 2 points I want to bring to the table.
Yeah, I think my point about awards was that I would put those achievements under awards in a resume rather than under the job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yes, good point.
Perhaps one last question before we go to breakout groups.
Yeah, Peter, I've got a quick question for Katrina. First of all, thank you very much, Katrina, for your presentation. It was really helpful and nicely structured, so I was able to take really good notes. So thanks so much for that. But I've got a question around the achievements in terms of quantifying them. When I think back 10 years, my memory is not that kind of red hot. And unless you're year to year thinking back each year, right, what were the 3 things I did? I know that I'm going to struggle a little bit to do that. And I wondered to what degree of accuracy we need to get to, in the sense, not to lie, but to the extent of saying, I can think of situations where we made significant savings, but I couldn't hand on heart say I'm to the dollar clear what those savings were, but maybe kind of I can give a ballpark figure. I mean, would you throw those numbers in?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, Paul. So don't feel alone in that. I can tell you 99.9% of my clients struggle with this work and do take some time to do it. So I've got one guy who's been working on building this achievements database for 4 weeks because it's just really tough work, and it's actually getting you to frame things that you did in a way that you probably are not used to. This is not culturally the norm in Australia that we do this. I find Americans that I work with have no trouble whatsoever with this, and it's done in a minute. But I feel like culturally here and in the UK, this is not something that we're comfortable with. So I'm kind of forcing people to do something that feels really uncomfortable. So that is number 1 reason why it's hard. But number 2, of course, the memory thing. So what I often say, if you can't come up with the exact number, you just say in the order of or approximately. And even if you can't come up with a number, significantly improved or, significantly reduced costs or something like that. I mean, it's great if you can kind of give some idea of kind of quantity, because, you could be saying, I increased costs by, or I increased sales by 50%, but we were only talking about $30, as opposed to you might be talking about $200,000. So kind of giving the order can help to get a sense of where you sit. And I think from an interviewer perspective, that's really useful. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much there for your questions.